Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all over the world of crypto, blockchain, and recently AI. I have an amazing show for you today. I'm going to learn some new things, as of all of us are. I have a wonderful guest. He's the founder and CEO of 404. His name is Ben James. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jamal. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining me. And I say people are going to learn new things because I have some new terminology that I've never heard of before. So it's going to be great. But before we get into that, let me ask you first, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
In parts, I would say it is. I have a very diverse background. First of all, I'm fortunate enough to have US, UK, and Italian citizenship, so I've bounced around a good deal of my life. I have a degree from the Kenan-Flagler Business School, which is one side of what I'm doing now as a founder, having that kind of business and economics perspective. But I've also taken a master's degree in architecture, which is particularly relevant to a lot of the design work that we're doing. And in fact, actually, the company, I'll go on to speak about it more, but came out of some of the problems that I directly faced working as an architect. The other side of my background that's probably a bit interesting is I'm a self-taught coder, and I've loved AI and technology for years. So I've really been prototyping a lot of stuff. Even probably the only way I got into this Masters of Architecture program was I coded some non-AI floor plan generators a couple of years ago, and was fortunate enough to be taught by an architect who's famous for introducing computation into design, into architecture design some 40 odd years ago. His name is Greg Lynn. He's a fairly famous American architect. And so I think that put me on a path here where, this combination of a little bit of business background. I worked as a strategy and finance consultant for a few years under that perspective. My architecture degree, and then really working at the intersection of design and tech was directly relevant to what I started building.
Master's in architecture. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I went to Virginia Tech undergrad. I had some friends who were in architecture undergrad, and that was challenging. So I know it must be really, really challenging. Awesome.
Yeah. It's a tough discipline, and I think it's also pretty interesting because you have to balance the technical side of architecture with a lot of the creativity as well. So it's a lot of, you find a lot of architects who go on to do very interesting things outside of the architecture profession because they're so, such a diverse skill set there.
Awesome. So let's talk about 404, right? What's it all about? How do you democratize 3D content creation?
Well, so the original founding idea for 404 was working as an architect, and I was looking for kind of new ways of working with design. A good example would be that as an architect, you might have a competition, an architecture competition that you want to participate in, and you'll have about 2 weeks to submit your concept design. But as a designer, you'll have thousands of really cool ideas for what you could or could not do, and this becomes a bit of a bottleneck there. And so I started prototyping. I was working at this time. I was doing a lot of museum and gallery exhibitions using machine vision for XR, AR, VR kind of stuff. And I started to think maybe there's an interesting way to connect machine vision with machine learning in a way that's generative in nature. And this was about 4 years ago. So this is pre-Midjourney, pre-ChatGPT. There's nobody really focused on the Gen AI space, and built up a small architecture generator trained on some plans and sections that was able to go from let's say in this case just a reference image of a structure you wanted to create, and it was able to create hundreds or thousands of structures that were stylistically consistent to that, architecture structures. Then was in the fortunate position to get funded from the European Union for this innovation. So started building out, and that particular grant came in the form of building for trustworthy AI applications. So that was kind of nice. It framed our building as we went, sort of having human sort of agency and ownership at the center of this design process. That was always kind of the core, is making sure within trustworthy AI applications that you're not kind of replacing humans, but you're rather kind of augmenting their intuition. So we started building that up. won a couple of awards, founded the company and won a couple of awards. So we won, for example, the most innovative AI solution in game dev, which was great. And that started to put us on the radar of game developers, aside from just architects. And that was also where then, we started broadening our scope and realizing, this type of technology is applicable to film and VFX, to urban planners, to XR applications. And one of the things that we quickly realized is, there's a content bottleneck, not just because of the speed at which you have to create content, but because of the number of people who are trained to create that content. So if you want to create a 3D world, you need a certain level of expertise within 3D modeling, within texturing processes. And so for us, the broader vision here was, how do we make this? We see a trend in which the world is becoming more digital. Things like XR and even within virtual worlds, the increased compute is allowing us to make larger, more high fidelity games. How do we address that? And the sort of solution for us is we'll allow anybody to become a content creator, because the thesis is that there are very many people who are very creative, but they don't have the skill set necessary to make some of these 3D models in virtual worlds. And so with that in mind, we started building out 404's tech stack. We go from text prompts now, so you're able to simply describe the type of 3D asset or world that you're looking to generate. And that's the main technical expertise that you need. We do everything from integrate into existing 3D software. So if you are a professional, you can go and sort of further iterate on that outcome with your existing skill set, but you don't need that. And this is where then some distinctions will come. But ultimately, it places more of an importance on creativity rather than some of the technical skills.
Awesome. You said two words there that caught my immediate attention. People are afraid of AI. A lot of people are afraid of AI being replaced. You said you're using AI to augment innovation, as in the AI is innovative and helps people with intuition, or replaces their intuition. And intuition is an area that I thought maybe AI couldn't replace. How do you augment the intuition and innovation?
Think about it this way. Pre-AI, all of your design tools were deterministic in nature, meaning that if you wanted to create a line between point A and B, there was one clear solution there. AI is indeterministic, meaning you simply need to give it a goal. You want to connect point A to point B. And how it does that is a little bit flexible. Depends on what it's been trained on, depends on who's using it, depends on what kind of controls you expose to the user. But the interesting thing is there are a lot of different ways that you can connect point A and B there that are not a simple line. And AI will expose a lot of those to you. And so you as a designer may see these iterations and realize, oh, there's something inherently creative or interesting or novel about this particular, whether it's a formal gesture or look at efficiency for a particular structure, and from that you can build out further on that. And so I think that really changes the role of the designer in some ways as well, because it really forces you to look for those kind of moments of innovation and creativity, and how can you work with the technology in a way that's productive, rather than simply trying to use it to execute a predetermined notion.
Got it. Yeah, they always say the fastest distance between two places is a straight line, but I've been in crypto in 7 years, and there's never a straight line. So it's good that you're flexible.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think the other thing that's kind of funny to think about is, by way of analogy, when television was invented, I don't know if you know what the first TV shows were.
Hee-haw?
They were people reading the radio, right? Because that was the extent that they thought this new technology could provide, was we'll do what we've always done, and now we will do it through the lens of the television. And of course, as we know, that has ballooned into sort of many new types of creative genres and shows and innovations. And so I think that's a little bit where we are at AI. And I appreciate the skepticism there, because a lot of people are skeptical, and with good reason, right? There are certain jobs, I would argue, where creativity is not the focus, that that they may be at risk to some extent for automation or replication. But I think we're also embarking on something that's going to open up a lot of really new, exciting possibilities and a lot of new roles and responsibilities that come with that.
Got it. That makes sense. So I do want to get into the creative aspect, but I do want to learn because there are some technology, some terms that I never heard before, and I just want to
Yes.
find out what they are. Gaussian splatting and neural radiance fields. What are they?
All right, let's dig in here, because this is pretty interesting about what we're building. I think there's a crypto component here to the project that I would touch on. That's kind of the foundational premise for some of these new types of what you both named Gaussian splat and neural radiance fields, or NeRFs as they are commonly called, are kind of two new innovative types of 3D representation. And what I think is important as a sort of foundational knowledge there is that 404 is building on BitTensor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with BitTensor, but BitTensor is a crypto platform aimed at AI commodities markets and essentially furthering decentralized intelligence. The thesis there is by using decentralization within AI, we're able to gain a lot of benefits from this kind of collective intelligence that comes in, and at the same time, we're able to rely less on centralized AI providers like an OpenAI or a Google would be. So because we're building on our project on BitTensor, it means that we're using two kind of key relevant points here. One is we're using open source models, and we are building open source models. So that's the first, I think, quite relevant point here. And then the second point is that we are doing all of this on chain, and we are using incentive mechanisms and incentive design on chain. Why that's relevant to the type of 3D AI that we are building? So Gaussian splats and neural radiance fields they are new forms of 3D representation. The industry standard would be something called meshes. But there are reason to believe that these types of new forms of representation are lighter weight, so they are able to put more assets into a single scene, for example. It means you're able to use new mediums like 3JS and WebGL for internet, for web viewing of these 3D models, and they function very well in XR applications. And the point here is that they are also less of a traditional approach, and they have a lot of research trajectory within the AI community at the moment for 3D graphics. And so for us, when we looked at BitTensor, we looked at a platform that was trying to use crypto and open source as a way of furthering innovation within AI generally. And we felt that these two forms of representation were some of the most interesting and innovative trajectories within 3D AI research at the moment. And so we've pushed that forward. I think from a practical perspective, there is a difference in the data structure that these have against traditional methods. But I think it's really that if we can put these types of outputs into the hands of creative people that are not usually exposed to them because they tend to reside more in the AI research realm of things, that will yield some really exciting creative results. And we've already seen that happening a little bit, actually. So we've seen people that have almost no formal background as a 3D artist create entire worlds that look phenomenal, almost AAA quality, with hundreds or tens of thousands of these models in them that would be impossible with traditional methods. And so for us, I think it's the innovation and sort of the cutting edge side of this form of representation that we're particularly excited by.
Awesome. I think you're the first guest I've had from BitTensor or building on BitTensor. So
Oh, wow.
I think, yeah, that's pretty cool. So awesome. So you're helping people, helping content creators bring their dreams to life. The other day, I don't usually remember my dreams, right? But I was like, I was at a club in my dream. I was being hit on by all the women in the club. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. And then my wife's alarm went off, and I woke up, and I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't really hit on at all. But it was interesting. So how do you help, and why is it important to restore and reshape how creators can bring their dreams to life?
I think it's that, one, we've seen it with we've seen it with some of the 2D generation. I actually think I like Midjourney a lot as a model sometimes to look at for a variety of purposes, including kind of business models and more metrics along these lines. But there are so many inherently creative people out there, that, like you said, you have a dream that you would really love to re-experience. Or I spend a lot of my time speaking with people who are making games and films, right? And they often will have some idea for this huge open world game, and they've always wanted to build it, but they don't have the resources, right, to do that. They don't have the time nor the capacity to hire so many 3D artists to go and model all of that. And so I think for me, the really nice part of this project is where you can use AI to basically allow these worlds to be created. And I think, like I was saying before, I think we're so early that as we see adoption within the creative industries of this type of technology, especially within in the 3D space, we're going to find there are all of these new use cases coming out. I mean, I think I personally am really excited by a lot of XR, so extended reality use cases, where you connect parts of what you see in the physical world with 3D digital objects there to augment some parts of the world around you in creative ways and efficient ways, in a diversity of ways. And so to me, that's really important. And I think it's also important because that's the background that I come from. So this was always something that I've thought is important for the world. I think when we're able to create immersive spaces and 3D content, I think we just sort of use it as a way to understand and orient ourselves within spaces and through forms in different ways. I think that's probably the architecture background in me that comes out there a little bit. But I think it's important for the world we live in. And I also think that then when we as a company looked at that, we just didn't see many opportunities for people to do that. And so we were able to develop the tech, and we were able to find BitTensor as a platform, and find that there was this great synergy between blockchain and open source decentralized AI models. And it kind of all came together in a way that I think this is a way that you can push the future forward a little bit.
Sounds good to me. So I want to find out, back in 2022, was it 2022? I had a lot of interviews about the metaverse, and NFTs and the metaverse, and a lot of them built on Polygon and Ethereum, and you're building differently. How's the AI space, the metaverse space? How's it evolved? People think the metaverse is dead, but it doesn't sound like it. So how's it evolved, and how's what you're doing the next generation of that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think in this space, so many words gain associations or stigmas, and I think metaverse is one of those ones that it had such high promise, and then had some manifestations that didn't live up to that promise, that there is some view that the metaverse is dead. But I think how we define the metaverse also makes a big difference here, because what we haven't seen die off are huge immersive experiences through games, for example. We haven't seen die off new technology that drives VR, or especially AR and XR innovation forward, right? And I think these are some of the foundational underpinnings of what I would consider to be the metaverse. I think there are some learnings, though, which would be that the virtual worlds themselves need to have more reason for people to spend time there, to engage with that. Attention is such a scarce resource in our society today. And I think some of the early iterations of the metaverse didn't capture that in the same way that they had hoped to. And my suggestion is that to some extent, there is missing this idea that you as a user are actively shaping this virtual world around you, or this hybrid virtual world if it's an XR experience. So this generally fits the terminology of user-generated content, right, within industry, or UGC. So there are games where you as a user can generate your own weapons or worlds, to your liking. And what we see in those worlds is a much higher level of engagement and attention, because you have some ownership over that, whether it's on-chain, technical ownership, or even just emotional ownership over the worlds and the assets that you create. And I think then to me, this is where AI comes in, because this is where all of a sudden, if you have a lot of people participating in whatever the next wave or generation of the metaverse looks like, you know that you want those people to be actively building and shaping that metaverse. And to have a critical mass of people actively building and shaping that metaverse, they need to have the tools that allow them to do that. And in our case, that's Gen AI. That's basically where those lower barriers to entry here make a huge difference.
Great. Awesome. So there are macro trends then in AI, right? So what are those macro trends, the big macro trends in AI, including Gen AI, right? And what are the greatest challenges to AI, I guess, adoption, globally with, at the intersection of blockchain and AI? What's the challenges with the macro
So
trends?
I think a couple of macro trends that I often think about is, one, the speed at which open source AI models are able to catch up and even overpass closed source models. I think this is very important because it creates more of a Cambrian explosion, if you will, of innovation that can take place on top of this, because you give people all of the access and the tools and the knowledge to do so. So that's one point. The other sort of thing that falls from that is, well, if you have open source models, this is ideal for decentralization. Since you have all of that shared knowledge, right? You can do things like decentralize the inference or the building of these foundational models or the applications that come from it. And so this means that more people can participate in the ecosystem. And this is kind of, then the third side of this is, okay, well, can we track that ownership and authenticity through decentralization, which is where blockchain would come in? And so to me, these are sort of three really nice trends that have come together. So the speed and trajectory of open source models, the decentralization that enables, and then the blockchain element of it, which allows you to track ownership and authenticity and other kind of typical Web3 principles that would flow through there. So to me, these are three trends that come together very nicely for AI at the moment. I think the other thing then in terms of growing that adoption is, okay, it's great that the tech is getting there, right? To give an example, up to this point, I guess, in the narrative would be that, with what we've built with 404, you will always have the absolute latest state-of-the-art or really built like ahead of state-of-the-art models for your 3D generation, because we have this decentralized network of, they call them miners in the BitTensor ecosystem, who are always on the lookout for new innovations. How can they change, adjust, and build better models? What types of sort of smaller dependencies and innovations and trends are taking place within the space? And they're all incentivized through crypto in order to do that. And so you've got that, which is excellent. And it means, from a practical perspective, let's say during this interview, a new NVIDIA releases an open source innovation that improves part of the 3D generative process. We would expect that within days, if not hours, we would see those already being implemented on our mainnet, on our subnet 17 on BitTensor. And if we were a centralized entity, it would take us longer to find those changes. It would take us longer to sort of process them through, retrain a model, but not the sort of decentralized world. They move quickly. They go for it. And then they're rewarded for all of that, right? It's all about incentive mechanism and incentive design there. So I think that's really quite exciting. And then the point is that the tech is in this phenomenal place at the moment. So how do we ensure that tech is adopted? And I think for us in our specific project, we have such a Web 2, Web 3 agnostic output in the end, that for us, it's a lot about this real world usage. It's, can we do partnerships with, industry leaders, not just in Web 3 gaming, but in Web 2 gaming as well? What about some of the existing infrastructure around building virtual worlds, game engines? What about industry adjacent projects, digital twins and film and VFX? So I think for us, what we expect is that as we're able to push adoption, right? It's often an industry where you need one or two breakout use cases, and everybody realizes, wow, this is what is capable from this small team, augmented by technology, for example, push it forward. So that's our goal and our plan, is to really focus a lot on the partnerships and the adoption, because I think that's what will ultimately drive increased usage and value back to the subnet, to our project as a whole, and even to the broader kind of AI research community around, especially these 3D Gaussian splats and neural radiance fields, which benefit from machine learning expertise.
Okay, interesting. So let's see if I get this right. The tech is there. Okay, you're bringing new creators in the door. All right. What do you think is going to be that moment to say, aha, this is an avenue for potential really and a boom in the industry? What's going to take it? It doesn't sound like it's going to take too much.
I think it's going to take that. I think it's going to take that viral game is what I think it's going to take, or virtual experience, where all of a sudden everybody is playing this game and wondering, how did they make such a visually compelling, huge world? Or how did they make such an interesting, unique experience where I can create my own content at real time, you know, against other users or in collaboration with other users? I think when you have that viral hit, it will lead everybody to look back on, and more people will start building on it, which means your chances for virality increase, which means you're going to get more viral hits, which means more people will come and build. And I think that's largely the flywheel that we think.
Yeah, I remember the early days of the BlackBerry, and then I remember when the iPhone first came out. You kind of remind me of that.
Yeah. And to some extent, you know, it's you're fighting away, and then boom, everything moves forward so quickly as everybody realizes the benefits of it.
Yeah. Cool. So we need to get some increased participation in the creator economy, don't we? So how do you get this increased participation, and how do you get experts, artists, talented people to join you in your vision and your mission, so they can apply the AI to their content creation?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, I think some of this is about awareness, and that comes through partnerships, through showcases of some of the stuff we're building, and through just making a lot of the tools open source, free and accessible, so that you really lower the barrier to entry and the friction points there. I think it's also just about you know, the ethos of Web3 and decentralization here. So making sure that this is an open and collaborative ecosystem, that if somebody wants to build on top of the tech that we have built, or on top of the tools that we have built, that is encouraged completely. You know, I think this is where you really want a community to form around what we're building. And I think also it's not a community that needs to be either Web 2 or in our specific case, either Web 2 or Web 3 specific focused. There are a lot of really creative people out there that don't understand or have a desire to engage with blockchain, but I don't think this should be a barrier for them. I think how the actual tech is developed and built is one element where blockchain plays an incredibly important role for us. But the actual end users, you know, they can create these worlds directly in, you know, Unreal or Unity, two major game engines that they've been using their entire creative career. And then they just, you know, they just work with the outputs of those models.
Awesome. So let's say you have a whole bunch of new creators. Okay, there's creators, there's the building, there's awesome, and there's just noise, which, you know, the loudest right now get heard for some reason, but they do. And then you have the world adoption. So how do you navigate through that barrier of noise, you know, and crud and crap, and so that you can get your visions out there to everybody?
You are so right. I mean, it's that is one of the most difficult things about the AI space at the moment, is there's a lot of noise in AI, and it's difficult to distinguish signal from noise in many regards. I think, you know, it depends on to some extent who you're talking to. So for us, for example, I think the fact that we've been building this tech before Midjourney and before ChatGPT were publicly released, I think that's one element of credibility that helps us cut through the noise a little bit. The fact that our team has backgrounds coming from the industry, not just AI backgrounds, but backgrounds of people that have been building AI tech in game studios, in film productions, right? Again, lets us focus on having maybe a product that speaks beyond simply the underlying tech and more about the results of that product. And I think you know, for better or for worse, the way that we've ultimately got to cut through that noise is just having phenomenal outputs and products and results from the tech. Because to some extent, nobody's going to, like, we're not going to be the one that's going to cut through the noise for everybody else. It's going to be the unbiased artists who go use this technology, make that compelling game, make that compelling virtual world, make that compelling new experience that I can't even begin to imagine right now, because they've got that creative vision and they do it using the tech. I think that's what is going to really signal, okay, this is not just noise. This is not just some, you know, thing that's been repackaged or done in a different way. This is actual new technology that changes the way I'm able to create, adjust the scale and scope of the worlds that I can do. And yeah, that's what I'm particularly excited for.
Sounds exciting to me. So I look forward to seeing what comes out of everything you're working on. It sounds great. So um, I want to thank you, very much for speaking with me today. Like I said, this is really compelling. So I have one last question. How can people find out more information about you, about 404? How can they start to create and build using your technology? How can they do that?
Well, the easiest way is they can go to our website, which is 404.xyz, and there they can already test the generator. So they can run some live generations off of our BitTensor subnet. They can go directly to BitTensor and find us. So we're subnet 17 on BitTensor. And there's a Discord there that would allow them to get more into the crypto side of stuff, the incentive mechanism and design. And there's of course just playing around and following us on Twitter. So we're 404gen on Twitter. My Twitter handle is the number 6329, but you can easily find me also through our website, and always reach out. I think in particular, we're always excited to see what people are building with the tech. So we've already had artists share worlds and games and experiences they've made, and we're happy to highlight that as well, because like you said, we want to show that this is a really nice new technology and people are using it. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Jamil.